Historic mandate, promise of change and Achhe Din. 4 years later, the question is, has the Modi government delivered or not? We asked you to tell us what you think. One hit and one miss of the Modi government. At the outset, we want to thank you for your overwhelming response and more so for the well thought out responses. Now, it is impossible for any government to do everything right or for that matter, everything wrong, which is why it's important to look at 4 years of this government in a detailed, nuanced manner instead of perhaps a random rating. To do that, helping us today, we have Soumyakanti Ghosh, Chief Economic Advisor at the State Bank of India, Aarti Jerath, a Senior Editor at the Times of India, and R Jagannathan, Editorial Director at Swaraj Magazine. Welcome to all of you and thank you so much for your time. We're also through this show going to run all of the responses that you have sent us, and we're going to use that as talking points to discuss some of the things that this government has done. Let me start with a response which has come from Sanjay Shinde Patil. And in his hit, he talks about DBT, fiscal deficit, ease of doing business. In his miss, he talks about measures to ease farmers' pain. In fact, in a number of responses, the overwhelming point of view was that GST was a very good thing, demonetization not so much. So let me start with what this government has done on the economy and start talking about GST, in fact. And I'm going to start here with Soumyakanti Ghosh. A lot of the responses we've got have been that GST and implementing it has been good, but the manner of implementation has left much to desire.
See, I believe that to some extent it is true, because you are trying to implement or rush through the GST implementation at 2017 because you did not have time. Because if you want to get the benefits by 1 year, 2018 and 2019 is the election. So from that point of view, I think the government wanted to implement the GST, and maybe the gap between demonetization and GST was not wide enough because the economy may not have recovered from the shock which got in November 2016. So from that point of view, yes, the GST is a very pragmatic reform, but the way it was implemented and the changes which has been done after that, I think it's a reforms in process and it will take some more time for that to sink into the economy. So from that point of view, I believe even though it was a good reform, maybe the changes which was, I mean, it's a continuous process. Look at the experience of Malaysia, it has now abandoned it. I think it could have been, on the hindsight, could have been done a little better.
Ms. Jerath, would you agree that one of the biggest misses has been demonetization? It's been a year and a half since that big shocker, and we've gone through a whole process of what it was meant to do, what it has really done. At the end of it, a lot of people who've written into us have given that as their number one miss.
As a number one miss? Or a number one hit?
Number one miss. Most people are not happy about demonetization.
Sorry,
they're happy about GST.
Miss. Yeah. Well, I think GST theoretically is a very good idea. Clearly, as your previous panelists and many of your viewers seem to feel that there's much to be desired in its implementation. There was a lot of confusion initially. I think some of the wrinkles are being ironed out, but it's obviously going to take a lot more time because we are not such a digitized economy yet. We are not such a computer literate society yet. So I mean, I think that there are a lot of glitches which still have to be fixed. As far as demonetization is concerned, I right from the beginning felt that it was a really bad move because most of our economy is cash economy, particularly the rural economy that runs on cash. All small businesses run on cash, small shops run on cash, and if in one day they just wiped out everybody's cash, it became worthless. Now it was a huge shock to all these sectors, and if the idea was to eliminate black money, I'm sorry, that purpose hasn't been achieved because black money is back. There's lots of cash floating around, a lot of transactions happening in cash, and this high rate of GST, 18%, is actually encouraging people to sort of do transactions in black, because it's such a heavy tax. So, you know, I'm sorry, you know, demonetization would definitely count as a very big miss of the Modi government.
Mr. Jagannathan, just your view on both GST and demonetization, because we've seen this again and again. A lot of people who've written into us are a bit ambivalent, I would say, about GST. They think that the idea it was finally implemented is a great one, but there is tons of feedback on how it is still poorly being implemented after so much time. Demonetization, on the other hand, seems to have given this government almost immediate political gains, but nearly a year and a half down the line, do you think that story has changed?
Yeah, I think demonetization misfired for the simple reason that the government's unstated expectation was that nearly 2 to 3 lakh crores will not come back, and that money, if it was now available to the exchequer, would have been very good for welfare spending. But that did not happen. Almost every single rupee came back. So that's one thing where it did not pay off politically, but suppose it did, it would have paid off both politically and economically for the budget to get that kind of resources. So I think that is one reason. Second thing is GST and demonetization. Demonetization, if it was a standalone, would have probably sorted itself out in about 3 quarters. But because it was quickly followed within 6 months by GST, you actually had an accentuation of the cash crunch, because demonetization weakened the economy, and especially the farm economy, which has suffered 2 serious droughts. And then the cash crunch came in the year after that when he had a good crop. So it created a problem. But I think GST probably came in a little too soon, but then politically there was no other window of opportunity. Either you delayed the GST for 2019 after the next general election, or you had to do it in 2017. That's what they have done. And GST, I think everybody says it's badly done, but I can tell you one thing. In India, in a complex economy, you cannot get a one-shot success in a complex thing like GST. So it's being steadily improved. My guess is that in another 2 quarters, it should be fairly well settled. And it is a future hit in the sense that right now, a lot of people are still adjusting and miffed about it. But it's going to be a future hit because it's formalizing the economy at a rate which would never have happened without GST. So I think we are learning to pay taxes, and the process is painful, but there is no other way you can do it.
Let's go through some of the other key things that people are saying. A lot of our viewers have written in saying that they are happy about the way DBT, or direct benefit transfer, has been implemented. Over 30 crore new accounts opened. But on the other hand, farmers are still in pain and in distress. The rural areas seem to be in a lot of people's miss list. And I just want to get a view on that first. I'll go to Ms. Aarti Jerath. Do you think that the other will outweigh the first? Also, do remember that perhaps a lot of people writing into us are not those hit the most by farmer problems. One assumes, but they still feel that pain, and we have seen it time and again.
Yes, because, well, I think a few things, you know, have happened which have, you know, opened the eyes of those who live in cities and towns to the plight of those who live in rural areas. One, of course, was that big march in Mumbai. And I don't think Mumbai has ever seen that kind of a farmers' protest march, where thousands and thousands of people from villages, you know, walked through the streets of Mumbai barefoot, you know, just to protest, just to highlight the distress that they're facing. And the second is, you know, well, there were 3 things. Then, of course, there were the farmers' protests in, you know, Madhya Pradesh, in Delhi. Again, you know, coming out onto the streets, you know, in cities and towns, and therefore urban people have become aware that there is something going on in the countryside which is disturbing the farmers. And the third thing, of course, is the growing number of suicides that we read about every day, or we, you know, see on television. And I think those figures are quite disturbing. I mean, thousands and thousands in Karnataka, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and now even states like UP and Punjab, which really didn't see that kind of suicide rate. Even those states are being hit by suicides. So I think, you know, for the first time, there is a consciousness that has grown in urban India that something is not quite right in the countryside, that government after government, and I would not blame just this government, I think even previous governments have failed to address you know, the sort of agrarian economy, failed to incentivize it, and therefore, you know, the growth rate has been really poor. Farming has become an unproductive business, unproductive profession, unproductive career. Land holdings are shrinking, and you know, there's no really. I mean, this is a problem that has been growing over many years. So the Modi government is not the only one that has failed to address agrarian distress. But at a time when, you know, there is joblessness in urban areas because the government has failed to produce an action plan, failed to attract investment in manufacturing and service sectors, and therefore there is you know, no growth in jobs. For people who migrated from the, you know, countryside earlier and managed to get jobs in cities and towns are today finding that door shut to them. So, you know, the distress has become even worse in the last 4 years.
You know, I just want to go through some of those responses very quickly. And Aarti, Jerath spoke about jobs. That's a point that Kaka Sahib Rao also brings up. One of his miss is jobs. His hit, though, again, is direct benefit transfer that we've spoken about. I'm going to tell you what Vivek Kumar is saying. He says the hit for the Modi government, according to him, is an impetus on renewable energy and electric vehicles. Though I don't know how far that has really gone in implementation. The miss is ruining of institutions like the RBI, Election Commission and the courts. I want to come to Soumyakanti Ghosh on jobs, because there is a constant controversy about jobs, and Mr. Soumyakanti Ghosh finds himself at the epicenter of it time and again because of your payroll data reports. The argument, and there's a latest figure which says that 30 lakh jobs were created because of EPFO data. The counter argument is that these are just jobs in the formal sector and not necessarily jobs on the whole. Do you really believe that jobs is an issue, or are jobs being created?
See, there are two sides of the same coin. I think jobs will always remain an issue in the Indian context. If you just consider the figure that there are 25 million babies who are born every year, and even if you take the labor force participation at 53%, the World Bank data, the number of people who are seeking jobs comes to around 13 million. So even if I assuming that the payroll data is, as the payroll data we are providing employment to 6 to 7 million people, that means there still remains a sufficient gap. So that's point number one. The point number two is that yes, the payroll data which has been, and we have written about it, which shows that from September to March around 39 lakhs payroll numbers were created, but this time very interestingly the EPFO also gives out those registered companies which have actually formalized themselves. That means they had employees less than 20, now they have more than 20. So if you even take out the number still comes to, for September to March, comes at an impressive 34 lakhs. My point is that these jobs, the problem in India is that we are not producing enough quality jobs. These jobs which the EPFO provides are of low quality in the range of which salary is less than 15,000 rupees. So therefore I think we need to ensure that we give the sufficient compensation to the people who are looking out for jobs, because at the end of the day that's the problem we are plagued about. We are a country with a logging in a 7% growth rate. So at a 7% growth rate it is very difficult to believe that we are not producing, we are producing very measly amount of jobs which are often quoted in the market, because China, which 6.5%, USA with 2.5% growth rate, produces employment which is much lower than India and having a GDP.
No, so then let me put it a different way to R Jagannathan, because jobs will be an issue in a country like India with such a huge youth population. Let's talk about how this government has planned or tried to tackle it, which is to focus on self-employment. The Mudra scheme, for example, I'm going to I'm going to have to cite the pakoda argument over here. But is self-employment as the panacea of jobs showing itself to have worked at all?
No, I think if you're not able to create good jobs, good quality jobs, and the informal sector is also bleeding, then I think you have to give people the wherewithal to start to find themselves some means of livelihood. But no, I think Mudra loans are not the answer, but it is for part of palliative measures. So just like you have Narega schemes, you can't get jobs, so you therefore create boondoggles. Similarly, Mudra is somewhere in the middle. Say, look, create employment by try and sell pakodas or bananas on the street. So that's important because it alleviates total poverty at some level. But ultimately, the economy has to create jobs. And for that, you need major labor reforms and some more incentivization to do that. I think the reforms need to come at the state level. And I think the last two budgets have allowed fixed term contracts and other things. These will all improve formal employment opportunities and loosen the labor laws to some extent. But state level realities need to ensure that the labor laws do not become a restriction on expanding things. Don't forget, there is also a huge increase in the amount of automation that is going on all over the world. And India is not going to be immune to it. So unless and until you improve your labor laws and you make labor laws more flexible, you are not going to get the kind of increases in jobs. But jobs are not being created, okay? We are growing at the rate of the employment elasticity of the Indian economy is about 0.2, which means at 7% growth, you're getting about 1% growth in employment. Depending on what the base is, you're talking about probably creating something of the equivalent of 5 to 7 million jobs a year, when you need to probably create between 8 to 10 million. So you're short by about 2 to 3 million, and that is the reality, and that is the thing which every government needs to address.
The problem also for this government is what they promised versus what is happening, which has perhaps made it a little more difficult for them. I want to come to a couple of more points, and a lot of people have written in about IBC and the implementation of the IBC code, also talking about it with the NPA mess and what we're seeing happening with balance sheets of public sector banks, how trust has been eroded in public sector banks as well. How would you rate the Modi government's handling on that?
No, I think it's a very remarkable reform, the insolvency and the bankruptcy code, because we had a system whereby people used to, I mean, if there was some amount of assets going NPA, you have a judicial system whereby you may not get back 5 years, 4 to 5 years, you keep it on the balance sheet, it gets eroded and then you write it off. So I think the insolvency code is a very good reforms. But it's a work in progress. I think there's a lot of changes which are being made to it, and hopefully there will be some more changes which will be made to it. But I think it's one of the reforms which the government can seriously boast of, because in the next 1 or 2 years, the fruits of these reforms will be felt when we will have a culture of people repaying back the loans which they have taken from the bank.
Can that really look good for this government, Aarti, Jerath, unless there is some resolution to what we've seen with the Nirav Modi case and the sense that people got after that case that a lot of big, powerful customers of banks and wealthy corporates got away with siphoning money out of the system?
Precisely. I was just going to say that, you see, this insolvency code and things like that, these are all, great things for economists and people to talk about and for, governments to do. But if you're talking about the common man on the street, it doesn't really mean anything to him. And, at the end of the day, politics is about perception. For the common man, the story that is unfolding is that rich man, a diamond merchant like Nirav Modi, sort of fled the country, leaving behind a mountain of debts, which ran, the figures that were going were like 10,000 crores, 11,000 crores, 13,000 crores, and, and has just fled the country. And the government will probably never be able to bring him back to punish him. And Nirav Modi is not the first. Before that was Vijay Mallya, and mind you, a lot of these NPAs, piled up during the previous government's time. But the flight by these people, Vijay Mallya, Nirav Modi, the flight happened under this government's watch. And therefore, this government cannot escape the blame for being blind to something that was happening under their nose. And that is a public perception. You know, I mean, great. You know, you're sort of trying to clean up the mess. You're trying to get stricter about NPAs. You're trying to, you know, sort of get banks to balance their sheets better and stuff like that. But, you know, to common people, all that makes no sense. That's happening in some other ecosphere. Common people want to know, how does a person like Nirav Modi manage to diddle the system out of, you know, crores and crores of rupees and then just flee and escape punishment? That's the problem.
You know, that was also somehow echoed in what JP Dhiman wrote to us, where he said the hit for him from this government is decision making, but the miss is bulldozing all kinds of opposition views and a dictatorial attitude. I want to come, you know, to all the panelists a bit on that point. On the one hand has been the perception that this government is able to make strong decisions. Then there's a question mark about implementation. But the flip side of that, Aarti, Jerath, is that when you're making strong decisions by yourself, you are also giving out the perception that it is only your writ that finally matters.
Well, I think this perception has been strengthened by the fact that, you know, we see so much disruption every time Parliament is in session. And, you know, there are, I mean, the list of bills that are pending to be passed just keeps growing with every session. And, you know, while, of course, the opposition, you know, must take its share of blame for this, at the end of the day, it is the government's duty and responsibility to make sure that Parliament functions and, you know, decision-making, law-making happens, you know, at a good pace. Unfortunately, the government has not really made that possible, and the chasm, the gap between the opposition and the government has grown so hugely over the last 4 years that we've reached a stage today where they are not able to talk. There are no channels of communication between the opposition and the government. And now, of course, we're heading into an election year, and so that, you know, that gap is absolutely unbreachable. So, you know, the perception that, you know, the perception that the government is just bulldozing its way, it's not consulting oppositions, it's not consulting even members of its, you know, its own party, you know, that perception is just going to grow. And, you know, and unfortunately, you know, Modi ran the government in Gujarat pretty much in this fashion. He was, I mean, all decision making was centralized in him. And he's just transferred that model to Delhi. And I think today, now, it's difficult for him to escape the charge that this is a highly centralized government, even more centralized than the government was under Indira Gandhi, which, mind you, it was a very centralized government. So all power rests with the PMO, and there is an impression that ministers have very little power. They are given orders by the PMO, and they just carry them out. And the way, you know, sort of, you know, Modi kind of does these video conferences directly with joint secretaries, directly with secretaries, while it may be good for their morale, but it also gives the impression that he, you know, he wants to be in command all by himself, a one-man band, as they say. So it's a perception.
Yeah, the flip side of that is that all success comes to you.
The Modi government is going to find difficult to.
Absolutely. The flip side of that perhaps is that all success is at your door,
but, you know, then
so is all failure.
But then you also have to, that's right, but then you also have to be ready to take the blame for the failures. Okay, so the hits are yours, but the misses are yours as well.
So, you know, one of the misses perhaps in public perception right now, and I want the economist view on it, is petrol and diesel prices, retail prices. The government has found itself in a fix because all of the gains it made when international prices were low by keeping those excise duties, you know, up and running, seem to not be helping them right now. They are not sure what to do, how much they can cut would hit their fiscal deficit calculations. Do you think that this has been a lost opportunity for this government? How would you rate this government's performance on managing the low crude price bonanza that they got right when the term started?
No, I don't believe it's a lost opportunity, because the way the things were structured, that when the prices were low, you impose an excise duty, and when the prices go up, then you actually cut the excess duty so that the policy works in an asymmetrical manner. That may not have worked, but I think the government has reaped the benefits of low oil prices, and the money with the social security programs which has been running, they're financing all these programs. My sense is that it's a decision between the devil and the deep sea. If you cut the prices, for example, even if you cut the excise duty by 2 rupees or 1 rupee, 2 rupees, 3 rupees, and even the states cut, the impact on petrol and diesel prices may not be more than 2 to 3 rupees. But that would cut the huge exchequer loss of around, maybe for fiscal deficit, for example, it could be more than around 13,000 crores. So my sense is that it's a decision which is very delicate decisions. Hope the crude prices come down faster. There are indications that it has started to come down, because until if it doesn't come through, and if it stays at this level, then it will be a difficult year in terms of resource mobilization, and that could put a lot of pressure on the other parameters like fiscal deficit, the inflation number, and also the current account deficit. So there is only one hope, that the crude prices rally in the second half, which has been fortunately the case in the last 2 to 3 years. When you see that the crude prices go up in the first half, global crude prices, then they tend to come down in the second half. Hopefully, if we look at that situation, it will be in a better position.
The Prime Minister had said when crude prices were low that I'm lucky. Let's hope that luck for him remains, because it helps all of us at this point. I just want to come to one other key point that has come in what people have said, and I want to come to Aarti Jerath on it, because people have talked about, and Jadhav, for example, says that his hit is leveraging IT, but his miss is polarization of opinions. We have another viewer who's written it, Dilain, who says hits are toilets. A lot of people, by the way, lauding Swachh Bharat and that entire campaign, but says Mrs. Hindutva. Is this something which is going to play on people's minds as they enter the last year of this government's tenure, about how a government chosen on the basis of Vikas has come to be defined by a large section of people as one which has polarized opinions? Even within friends and families, every drawing room conversation has two sides, people who love this government, people who absolutely despise it. Is that a reality of where we are today?
No, I think polarization, I mean, is really at its peak today. And it's polarization in many ways. I mean, it's not just religious polarization. There is also caste polarization. I mean, for instance, the kind of attacks that we're seeing on Dalits in states like Gujarat and UP, public floggings, and then you video them and you put them out on WhatsApp, almost as if you're boasting that, you flogged a Dalit in public. I mean, this kind of, caste polarization, we have not seen for a long time. And, I think that sections that are being hit by this polarization, that are at the receiving end of majoritarian opinion or majoritarian assertion, those sections are feeling very, very angry and upset, and they have actually consolidated against this government. And that's why this latest survey that has come out, it's very interesting, the CSDS, ABP poll, which has talked about, sort of 49 or 47% of people not wanting to give the BJP a second term. A large number of that 47 is actually, sections like the minorities and the lower caste Dalits and tribals, who have been, I think, the worst hit by the polarization that we have seen over the last 4 years.
Well, I'm going to end off this show by once again thanking all of our viewers for writing in with very sensible points of view, with one hit, one miss, but also asking our guests to give us their one hit and one miss, knowing fully well that no government can do everything 100% right, and nor can a government do everything 100% wrong if they are actually running this country. So I'll start with you, Mr. Soumyakanti Ghosh. One hit and one miss of the 4 years of Modi government.
One hit is the GST, and one, I'll not call it a miss, but still I believe the bank recapitulation may have been done a little earlier.
Okay. I'll give you the leeway of being diplomatic there, but Aarti Jerath, one hit and one miss from your end.
Well, I think one hit has been the, attempt, the Swachh Bharat campaign, which was really an attempt to, introduce the concept of sanitation and hygiene and, all that in people. I mean, it hasn't done as well as it should, but at least somebody was talking about it. And, it became a mantra, and I think it is maybe percolating into people's consciousness. So I think that's been one very good, thing that the government started, at least in terms of developing consciousness. As far as miss is concerned, I think demonetization was a very, very big miss because it has really hit people where it hurts. I mean, an economy that runs largely on cash, if you suck out 86% of that cash, you're leaving people with nothing. And, it was affecting, really small people like, housewives across the country who, squirrel away money from the household money that they get from their husbands every month. And they squirrel it away to, give presents maybe to their grandchildren or to their daughters-in-law or something. They all had to come out and confess to their husbands that actually they had thousands and thousands and thousands lying under their saris in the cupboard. And, I mean, anecdotally, it led to, incidents of domestic violence because husbands felt really upset and cheated by this. So, down to that kind of level, I think demonetization hit people really hard.
Well, as you said, that politics is about perception. So at the end of the day, it's important to look at what the numbers and statistics also tell you about how this government has performed on economic indicators. And on the other hand, the feeling that people are left with as well. I want to thank you for participating on the show, Aarti, Jerath, Soumyakanti, Ghosh, and of course, R Jagannathan. And of course, to all of our viewers who have taken the time to think about this and write into us.